Nice. Hello, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Gwenda Lambert here with my co-facilitator in the grief recovery method, Miss Heather Lacey. Hello.
Hello.
How are you today? Did you get in the garden?
No, it's been too much rain off and on, so
Oh,
it's too wet to too much of anything. So maybe later, we'll see.
oh, cool. Well, thank you for anybody that's joining us today, everybody that's joining us today. We are going to talk about the grandpappy of them all. What is grief? And this is a topic that is widely misunderstood, although it's probably one of the few, like love, that we can all experience, right?
We all do experience.
Exactly. Well, I was saying that, and as I was saying that, there's maybe not all of us have had the privilege or blessing to be able to feel love, but I know that we all feel grief, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to start today because I want this to really be an organic conversation between Heather and I, because a lot of times we know why we're both here, but to be able to explain what grief really is probably one of the biggest surprises of the grief recovery method. Even though I thought I knew, I didn't. And when I heard, first of all, number one, grief is a natural and normal reaction to loss. It's absolutely 100% normal, 100% human. We are all emotional beings. When I heard, again, the Grief Recovery Institute has a definition of grief, which is the conflicting feelings caused by the end of or change in a familiar pattern of behavior. And I heard that and I went, yes, that's a great description. I would also like to add on a little caveat on the end that it's any kind of transition. This is the conflicting feelings caused by any kind of transition we may go through as well. So this really rings true for me, because my biggest losses, my biggest emotional setbacks have not been from death. What are your thoughts on this, just on that part of the conversation, Heather?
Yeah, I think that was key for me too. That definition really kind of expanded everything. And I think one of the key things is we do talk about this in class, but we talk about the backpack, right? Adding grief, adding grief, adding grief. And oftentimes we assume that that has to be something that's terrible or big or has some kind of momentous moment in our life of loss associated with it. But this definition expands everything so that you can put a framework around those little things that happen just in kind of day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year, of things that happen and change, and how they do, we do grieve them. It may not be buckets of tears kind of grief and that kind of feeling, but it is something that you need to acknowledge, and you need to have a moment or a process to let yourself work through it. And I think that was the biggest thing for me, because all of those teeny little losses and teeny little changes, as we say, end of or change in a familiar pattern of behavior, all of those little changes add up. And all of that little grief compounds and compounds and compounds and compounds. So even if you don't have a major, big, momentous loss, you can still be overwhelmed by grief, because you've got an accumulation of all these little pebbles in your backpack that are just weighing you down. And you may not know why, because you don't associate that with something that you should be grieving, or something that you should feel any kind of sadness or loss about.
Oh, and that's such a good point, Heather. I love everything that you've just said. Thank you. The thing that, again, an example from my own life was I was at a company and I knew that I was one of those people that was going to be laid off or made redundant, whatever it is. And it was a good group of people to be with. But the other part of it was I was looking forward to trying something new, doing something new. But it was still the end of a place where I saw these people daily. That, we had this one guy in the office that talked with such a loud voice, and then he'd just laugh at his own, him and the guy next to him would have these conversations. And I just loved that. It was just part of going into the office every day.
Yeah.
And that would no longer be there. And so even though this was a good thing for me personally, it was still okay, well, all those little things, even the people that drove me crazy, that was consistency. That was my day to day. And that's, I think, one of the biggest things that scare us from taking on anything new. And it scares us as human beings. When you compound on this, the way that grief, when I've asked people, how many of you associate loss with only death? Almost everybody puts up their hands.
Yeah.
So we're just going to touch on grief is the emotional response to loss, which may be death, dying, and and when I would even say, like, we associate with, even with, like, as you said, like this big momentous traumatic effect. Even if we look at the movies that we go to see, the things that make that person memorable is like, he's really fighting because this gunslinger killed both his parents in one of these old Westerns, and he was going to come back and get revenge. And so all these human themes that are in all the movies that we have, it just makes it redundant. It just reinforces the idea that, first of all, there has to be some sort of explosive reaction when we have something move from our life or change in our life, instead of just, and because of that, it's those small losses, as you said, the pebbles in the backpack. And then one day it's just like, okay, I can't take this anymore. And you're going, where's this coming from? And
Exactly.
It's like, well, you've been ignoring all my little pebbles. You've been ignoring me.
And it's not even so much ignoring them. It's that society in general doesn't view those as actual losses. And I would take it, I mean, the work example that you gave is great. And I had the same thing when I left one of my jobs a number of years ago. I'd been working there for a decade or more too, and had spent a good portion of my 20s with this company, kind of growing up into a full-fledged adult with these guys, and had seen them 5 days a week, and 8 to 9 hours a day. And even though we had some people I had a relationship with outside of the office, but most of it was just inside the office. And leaving that was quite amazing on one side, because it was a choice, my choice to leave, but also quite distressing on the other side, because you're leaving that environment and those people that you've had that connection with. But I would even take it smaller than that, because there are those moments and those things that you do on a daily basis that all of a sudden change. I still think about, there was a gentleman that I used to ride the bus with, never knew his name. I was in my 20s. He was probably at that point in his 70s or 80s. I'm sure he's long since died, unfortunately. But he would chat for the 10 minutes that we were on the bus. And we weren't always on the bus every day, but good chance at least 3 times a week we would be on the same bus. And at some point that just stopped. He wasn't there. I moved, and you don't see that person again, and you don't have that same routine, catching that same bus. I used to ride with the same bus driver, like it was just like all of those kind of things. And those are losses that impact you. And if you just kind of push them aside and don't acknowledge that that person had some kind of small value in your life at that particular moment, and you just push it down as a loss that you're ignoring, those pile up, right? Those things pile up. But we're kind of taught to not like I shouldn't feel bad that I don't run into this person anymore, right? Like it's like he wasn't a friend in the traditional sense. He wasn't somebody I would go have coffee with or anything like that. It was very short conversations over a small period of time, right? But I still think about him. I still, like those things still come into my memory and still come into my head. So yeah, I think you can kind of take it even smaller into those impacts. And that was, for me, that was the thing, the change in a familiar pattern of behavior. It's that familiar pattern of behavior, whatever that is. That could be that every day you walk to the store, every day you do something. With the pandemic, I started walking on the track nearby my house in the morning, met a whole bunch of new people, and it was great and that was lovely. And then all of a sudden I was back at work 2 days a week and no longer going to the track 7 days a week, and changing that. And then I had a fall and then I wasn't going at all, and I've only just started going back. And and you're just, and everybody's, but it's that change, right? It's that change in behavior. It's that change in the pattern that if you don't acknowledge it, and if you don't process it, and if you just push it down and ignore it, it builds up.
Such a valid point. I think the really neat thing with that is, I think there's times where we don't necessarily know that we belong until we have been gone long enough to miss something.
Yeah.
And again, this is all different sides of it. When you were sharing this, I think of walking in the park every morning, and I did photo shoots on this during COVID, where there's this older couple and they walk hand in hand. They're holding hands. They're maybe like, I swear, if they're 5 feet tall, I'd be surprised. But they walk, they hold hands. They're this older Italian couple. And I went in the morning, I hadn't been for a while. Oh, where have you been? So, but on the other hand, there was this other older Japanese man who was very bow-legged. And so, but he would be out walking, and now I don't see him at all anymore. And again, as you said, I'm sure that he's died because he was slowing down, or, he's in some part of that. But I think it's those human moments that we have. And, I've had bigger laughs with strangers on a bus. If you talk about, I live in a complex here where there's 4 condos. Almost every single person I met at the bus stop, because I'm standing there, it's like, oh, hey, oh, you're not asking what their beliefs are and this or that. You're just saying, hey, we're 2 humans at a bus stop. We're passing time. If I'm feeling chatty, I'll say, hey. If you're feeling chatty, we'll say, hey, back. So I think you're right. It's those small human moments, right? That really make us feel confident, in some cases, secure. So it's really at the base of who we are as humanity. And then when we get the grief part is really just reckoning with the fact that there's maybe you wish that you told them that you appreciated the conversation.
Sometimes it's that, and sometimes it's just that it's not there anymore.
Yeah, no, but I mean,
sometimes it's just the fact that it's not there, right? Like,
no, but so this is the point I was trying to make there. And I just did a blog on this recently, is about the guy at the food bank, that at the end of the day, I said, I really appreciated our conversation today. And he was like, well, I'm not dead or anything. And it's like, no, but here's the thing. I don't know if I'm ever going to see you again. I don't know if I'm ever going to be in the same room as you again, because none of us know that. But this moment is here now. And I think that's the thing, or at least that's how I also look at the grief recovery method, is that it's actually a tool and a process that allows me to also get clarity of heart when I have had, somebody die, and I've been able to say, did I say everything I needed to say? Have I completed the relationship as much as I can while people are still alive and still in front of me? Because I could move tomorrow to South Africa. I could, Heather, you could go to New Brunswick. Like, we don't know. And that's the interesting part, because even that guy that I wrote the blog about, I've never been in the same room with him since that day. But he was like, Oh yeah, I guess you're right. I guess you're right. Well, I really appreciated the conversation. And you know, that's the funny thing is, you know, even when it comes to memorials or there's more celebrations of life now, but you know, when you go to somebody who's being honored through a work or some sort of volunteer work, and you get all these people saying nice stuff, it's like, I wish we did that more face to face with people while they're alive, not just when they're sick and unhealthy. And by that I mean somebody can have a health condition and all of a sudden they're in the hospital,
Yeah.
and that's never going to be the same. So I think the interesting thing is that if you appreciate, or my little 2 cents about this is, say your 2 cents, say whatever you need to say, especially positive stuff to each other. You know what, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I love your opinion on X, or I really like that insight on Y. I look forward to chatting with you again. I really like the shirt you're wearing today. It doesn't matter what it is, just to say, I notice you, I appreciate you, and you made my day better. What do you think, Heather?
I totally agree with that. I completely agree that yes, we should definitely, do more of that and more of those kind of things, and make sure that we are letting those people in our lives, no matter how big or small they're in our lives for, letting them know. But I think there's also value in realizing that sometimes you've said all those things. Like the gentleman on the bus that I used to ride the bus with, every time we finished our conversations, it was like, it was great to see you. Have a great day. I really enjoyed our conversation. Both of us would say similar, sentiments. But the stopping of doing that routine, that change in that behavior is also something that you need to grieve and process.
Mhm.
So not just the person, but the change in what's happening. Right? The change in your routine, the change in the pattern, the change in the everyday. So not just the people that you were working with and not seeing them, but the process of going to work every day and going to, right? That is also something, when you change that, even if it's a good thing, it's still a process that you need to, go through and grieve, and allow yourself to grieve. We've talked about this in the class, the whole moving to a new house, right? And or getting a new job, right? And it's you've got a new house, it's bigger, it's better, it's lovely, it's wonderful, but that doesn't mean you're not going to miss the old house, right? And that's one of those things that you kind of feel like you shouldn't miss it, because you're going on to something great, something good, something wonderful. So why should I be sad about this? Right? And that's where I think people feel that they shouldn't feel sad. They shouldn't feel bad that this has happened. But I think people need to realize that, we don't want anybody to wallow in any kind of negative feelings, but you need to allow yourself, the moment to process that you are leaving something that has been a very familiar, stable thing for you, good or bad, for the last however long in your life. And that, yes, you're moving on to something fabulous and wonderful, but you also need to acknowledge what space that current thing took up, be it a house, be it a job, be it a bus route, be it a,
Exactly. Well, and I think that's the interesting thing, because even on the other side, like changing, transitioning to different periods in life. Like I had another woman maybe last week was saying, yeah, I just realized that I was grieving the fact that she had turned 60, but she didn't put the fact, she goes, I'm grieving that I'm no longer like 40 something. I'm no longer 20 something.
Yeah.
So, and this is it, because I would call that a croning in the Druid world. And that is a part to be embraced, but it doesn't mean that you can't embrace the mother part, the creative part, the more, and really croning and mothering have nothing to do with age, but it's the fact that I'm moving into this different part of life. A lot of mothers, okay, I'm having a child, even when we get into sometimes depressive states, They can be a hormonal, but it can also be like, even though I've read all the books, I'm not that person that can just pick up and go to Montreal for the weekend. And to be able to say, yes, I'm excited about having this child in this new edition. It's okay to say, you know, I enjoyed this time. This is what I'm going to miss, or this is what I appreciated. And I think, again, I think it's one of the things is taking the time, as you say, to process what's going on in your life, instead of just having busy work, and making sure everything's planned and booked and, oh, just keep busy and everything will go away. It doesn't, it just drives it down deeper, right?
Right.
So,
exactly. It's that pushing down, right? We're pushing down those feelings and emotions and everything else. And instead of finding a way to release them and let it go, right? I'm, as you know, I'm leaving my quote unquote day job in the next couple of weeks. And about 2 weeks ago now, maybe 3, they changed the bus route that I normally take to work because they're doing some work on the station. So I realized the other day that it looks like it's not going to be done. I mean, before I go back to work, I will never do that route again. And it was like, wow, that's kind of, it was surprising how kind of much of an emotional attachment there was to that. Because I'm not necessarily fond of having to travel downtown for work, but it was just that emotional attachment of, I'm going to be finished my job before they finish the work, and I'm never going to go to work I'm never going to go on that same route that I go on. And it was kind of one of those moments where you're just like, oh my gosh, wow. And yeah, just taking a moment, acknowledging it, processing it, releasing it, and moving on, right, to the next thing and to the next process. But taking that moment rather than just pushing aside the feelings of the, wow, I'm not going to do that, and then just go, oh, that's stupid, I shouldn't be, that shouldn't bother me, I shouldn't care, it doesn't matter, it's just a bus route. And it's not even like I see the same people on the bus route every time, right? Like it's Toronto, it's a big city, it's a lot of people. I don't see the same people all the time, but it was one of those moments where it's like, no, just take a moment and process that. And yeah, and just acknowledge that you've been doing that for the last, 8 years, and you're not going to do it again.
well, I think that's a perfect way to really like wrap this up literally, is that one of the differences, and I know that we've gotten this from everybody that we've done it with, from ourselves, the awareness of what's going on around you is really a huge part of what you get from this process, because you are more present to, oh, I am having this feeling. Whereas before you might have brushed it off because you're not aware that it's like, oh, this is a little grief. This is a grief grab. I got a few seconds here of a little bit of feeling. Oh, what's that? And most importantly, not diminishing the fact that you're feeling anything. Never mind what that emotion is. And I think that the second part is, what is that emotion? It's a finality. It's like, okay, this is it. Goodbye. This is the beginning of goodbye, even though you're doing it over the next couple of weeks. It's just a natural sign of, that a change is coming. And it's an imminent change. And one of the things that I like to talk about is It's a Wonderful Life, where George Bailey goes up and he grabs the knob from the staircase and he has it in his hand and he's like, oh, and that's when he's frustrated with life. And he looks at that as an irritant. But when he goes out and he has the time with the angel, he comes back, it comes off in his hand and he goes, oh, you knob, you, and he almost kisses it. I think he does kiss it, because now it's allowing him to be present. It's allowing him to say, I love this. It's not perfect, but it's mine. It's not perfect, but this is my life. And I think that that's probably one of the challenging things that we have as humans, is to stay fully present in the mundane moments. So here we are coming up to 30 minutes. Gosh, that was easy. So any final thoughts, Heather?
No, I would just say I agree that that's, yes, one of the benefits of the program. It allows you to stay kind of a little bit more aware of what's going on around you and how it's affecting you. And I think that's also key. It allows you to realize how things are affecting you and how you're reacting to things, and gives you that moment of pause. So
Exactly. And just to let everybody know, we have our next session is starting on Tuesday. So if you're interested, it's the 8-week program. The great part is, as we've just talked about, it's not therapy, it's not counseling. It's just a process, a framework that allows you to really take a look at who you are and how you're showing up when it comes to allowing grief or acknowledging some of the losses that we may not be acknowledging in our lives.
yep, definitely.
Okay, so get in touch with Heather or myself. Tags will be underneath this program. Thank you for watching. I hope everybody had a wonderful, safe weekend with all this like crazy microburst rain that we get now that there's no climate change. And much love to all of you. And I will be back next week with Aisha. And then after that, Heather and I will be back once again, talking about another aspect of grief and various topics. Thank you very much for joining me today, Heather. It's so good to have you here. Okay, and thank you, everybody. We'll see you next week. Okay, bye-bye.